Truth in His Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and these are my conversations bridging arts, culture, and community. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, I have a returning guest just in time for Black Music Month, and we're going to go a bit deeper. We're going to talk about Black music. We're going to talk about club music. We're going to talk about Baltimore. My guest is known for her electrifying DJ sets where she's played in Baltimore and DC's best venues, as well as toured internationally, bringing Baltimore club music to new audiences. She's an ambassador for Baltimore club music and overall our sonic identity here in Charm City. Her sets have been described as life-changing. Please welcome Ducky Dynamo. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back.
100%. You're like, what do they say? Like, early adopter. You're on the ground floor of this illustrious podcast. So shout out to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally. And as is tradition, a recent tradition, thank you for wearing your glasses. Whenever someone wears their glasses, I got to point it out.
Yo, we pay money to see. So listen, y'all got to see it.
So it's been a bit. It's been almost 4 years. You're like in there
3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
Was that before pandemic?
It was
right before pandemic?
Right before, because we were in person.
That's right.
Yeah, we were at Big Improv. Yeah.
Yep.
And I got to ask you the wonderful question of what your favorite curse word is. So yeah, delightful. And I'm sure it's the same curse word, but before we get to the sort of deeper questions, I'd like to go backwards and, give you the space and the opportunity to introduce yourself in your own words. Cause I think, authenticity is what we're doing here. And I got a follow up to that, but I at least want to give you the space to introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you. I am Ducky Dynamo, as known in these Baltimore streets. I am, first and foremost, I consider it, I'll rank it out. First and foremost, I'm a DJ. If you do know of me, it's probably because I was sitting down DJing somewhere, playing some good old club music or anything that makes you dance somewhere, again, in these Baltimore streets. Beyond that, though, that's like the hook to get you into me. And then you figure out what the hell else do I do? I'm a curator, and I've recently adopted the term culturist, because I do in firm and all those other girthy type of sounding words for Black artistry in Baltimore, primarily Baltimore club music. And I've become enamored with investigating what that art is, what it means to us in the city, what it means to us as being Black in the city, and, how deep that goes beyond just the catchy beat, that we all grew up with, and, what it means for us. And I ride on that every day.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's it's very important. We're definitely going to dive deeper in there, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, do you have a favorite music memory? Like, you think back, like when I think of club music, right?
Yes.
I think of when Lafayette Projects back in the day, my dad like, yo, what is that noise? And I'm like, yo, this bops. This bops. What is this? And that's like early 90s, you know what I mean?
No, they never liked it, did they? But they did. They did a little bit. Especially when they got to see everybody start dancing to it. And then all of a sudden, if you know how to do the SpongeBob, any cookout, do that dance, you know how to do.
Yeah.
So my favorite musical moment, club music related, that like a memory I have is probably, I'm trying to pick a specific one. I don't have a specific one. What I do have is a sort of nebulous answer.
Sure.
And my favorite club music memories do have to go with those nights at the docks. I have sporadic memories of the Friday nights that I spent in a row for a year or two straight, just being in that environment. And this is the time that I'm thinking of. This is back like 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
I'm like 19, 20 years old, 20, 21 years old. So I'm first kind of getting into really what the nightlife of Baltimore looks like. and how it feels. And, I was into all these promotional groups and we were running, different parties damn near every night of the week. And it was just that vitality that was there. It was all soundtrack to club music. So those memories, you know what I mean? And like those experiences, I don't have one specific one.
Yeah.
It's just that vibe. It's like that is my favorite shit of the club music. And it's like my favorite, what I always pull back to, like, why do you like this? It's like, no, that feeling, those times, that moment in the docks, in the chamber, listening to, nasty DJ or super DJ, playing those things at 3 in the morning and we're shaking off to Black Star, and seeing everybody do the slide to the left routines and just like that. So it's not one moment, it's just the moment, kind of.
Yeah, it captures a scene and, sort of, you know, I guess how we define moments is important. Like you set a
Right,
stage, you had a time component there. So one could argue that that is the moment. The
right.
moment's longer than a minute,
Yeah, right. Longer
it's
than a minute.
period, you know what I mean? So and thank you, because you're in this ambassador role, this archivist role, like, you're one of those faces, one of those prominent faces related to, Baltimore club music and really putting and standing on that bold letters
Hmm.
versus what other people might try to call it. And we'll definitely get into that a little bit later, trying to change it for something else. Oh, it's a regional thing. It's like, no, this is ours. So in your time being more and more immersed in the scene,
Hmm.
being around as you touched on earlier with like sort of the nightlife component and being I guess a patron would be a word, to
Right.
being more of a person that's contributing to the culture in that bigger way of being, a person, music and archiving and all. How do you see like the last, let's say 5, 10, however many years, how do you see like the role of like Baltimore club music, playing into like the landscape of Black music today, specifically here in Baltimore, here in this region, like
Hmm.
role of Baltimore club music? Where does it fit in the larger conversation around Black music?
So, in the larger conversation about, all right, let me try not to deviate, but I can give you this metaphor. And speaking about Baltimore, period,
Yeah,
when it comes to culture, period, I always said, like, I like to joke that Baltimore is like not Maryland. We know that Baltimore is its own thing. And it is one of the only, I forgot the specific number, but one of the only actual independent states, independent cities in the whole country, right?
sure,
So it kind of stands alone. And I was like, if you were to liken it to its own country, to me, it seems like Baltimore really is like a little Africa in the sense where it is there, it is rich with resources, it has this shit going on inside of it that ain't necessarily right. It's grimy, but everybody comes and picks from it because it is so full of resources. The whole world will come pick this, pick that, pick this, pick that. And poor little Africa, poor Baltimore, however you want to, like I
sure,
said, carry that metaphor, is left with what? They
right,
speak on it, like, oh yeah, shout out to Baltimore, shout out to the motherland. But we don't really necessarily give back. We don't really necessarily truly pay homage, like it's a passing point type of thing.
sure,
So I say all that to say, when you look at it from that lens, in my opinion, that's where it's like, so what does it speak on for Black music? Because in Black music culture, because Black culture, period, has always been mined upon and picked apart, gentrified, all of those good things that we know that, the Eurocentric meltdown does.
sure,
And then fuck the Eurocentric, the American at this point in time, system has treated Black culture. Baltimore club music to me, and Baltimore hip hop in general, because it's not even necessarily just club music, but again, that's my ministry, so I speak from it. Um, it's the same situation. If you look at the history of club music, samples have been getting, taken from us the whole 30 years. So if you look at the last 5 years and look at kind of like this wave that's been taken over recently, like it finally looks like club music hit its, yeah, people know it, it's getting recognized, all that good stuff. You look at like its break, like take the Beyonce influence
mhm,
with, that one album, and then shortly after that came Drake with, his whatever, and And every couple after that, it was more and more frequent. You
Yeah.
had the baby making a track, you had, such and such making a track, and you hear that beat, you hear that sound. And now it's to the point where you're not surprised when an artist puts out a song now over this past year and you hear a familiar break.
Yeah.
You hear that same kick and you're like, wait, that's club music.
Right.
So it just seems like one of those things where what I'm looking at is what's going to happen after the wave,
Right.
because our reality has been here forever. If you know what club music is, you've known what it is. These artists and these mainstream industry type of lilts, they've always known what club music was. It's not a secret. It's just right now it's what's popping. It
Right.
hit, so it's like what I'm looking at, what I'm concerned about is what happens after that wave peaks. All waves do peak, and that's not a bad thing. That's fine. But it's like, have we done enough work,
Yeah.
and have the people really latched on the way it looks like they truly have? Because across the board, all of us are seeing more or less success, either through bookings or making music or anything like that. People are seeking our sound.
Right.
So it's like, is it enough to, after that wave, still have the attention? Or is the bubble truly going to burst and then solidify all of the, doom and gloom of, what people consider what's going on with club music coming out of the downfall and all this? It's considered like this renaissance now.
Yeah.
It's like, is it going to stick or not? Because the thing is, at this entire time, the work on the ground never stopped.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, just looking at the impact, to me, it just seems like a familiar story. Small cultures get picked up and amplified for the moment
Yeah.
all the time. But what happens after that? So I don't
No,
know.
I think it's a good point. And there's sort of this, and I've been kind of playing with this and diving back into some of these books I've been reading about sort of art and culture and how it turns into commerce, and we kind of cherry pick,
Hmm.
find it, and polish it, and make it something that's kind of not what it is. And
Hmm.
you know, what you were describing there made me think of an interview I did, actually at Big, where we did our interview. I did one with Scotty B. I bring all of the
Yeah.
DJs there for those interviews. And I remember him in a very Baltimore way. He was like, "Yeah, this used to be this over here. We're in Station North, or what have you, just reminiscing."
Right.
And it made me think, especially with what's happening in that area, like, sort of the real estate component, the sort of venues being open and kind of not open, and the intentional blighting, if you will, there.
And that's exactly what it feels like, by the way.
I call it
The
like
intention.
that.
You feel me? Like, and not to cut you off, but that's what a lot of, in trying to advocate for this, that's what a lot of people play bent about.
Yeah.
Or, because it's like, nah, you're victimizing yourself. You're, da 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 da. And it's like, no, if you really look at this situation, how could it be anything but not?
Yeah, I mean, in places that I'm not a club guy, right? But
Yeah.
that sort of area, that would be sort of my entry point to it. And the most times that I've gone and I've shaked my ass, and I'm not an ass shaker, but the most times that I've shaken my has been in that
In
footprint.
that region,
But we're
exactly.
we're talking over the course of 15 years.
Right.
And it's not really been in the last 7 because of the simple point that a lot of those places and those venues over there has closed. And I think when you start cutting out pieces of what the culture is, that preservation component starts to dissipate and it starts to go away. And then that conversation of, well, that's really Jersey Club, or that's really this,
Hmm.
or that's really that,
And
because the
thank you,
places that were
because
cathedrals of it are gone.
that's literally the link for me. And this is where this intentionality comes into play, and why it feels like we're battling something when instead we should just be celebrating it. Because it goes like this, like you just mentioned, and this is strictly from Ducky's point of view and Ducky's lab of numbers, like making up whatever, she come up with. So this isn't law, this isn't true facts, like all that. This is just how I see it, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned last 15 years, that's what Station North's been. Kind of like that's what it, right. That makes perfect sense. And you said basically kind of like the last, what, like 7-ish, 6 or 7-ish, not so much.
Yeah.
And certainly since after COVID, was it never ever the same again, right? But look at the areas in Baltimore that are.
Right.
You look at over by the casino until their recent, numbers. Yeah, and again, that's another art district, entertainment district that they birthed more or less, not more or less, but indirectly off of the heels of the closing of the docks
Sure.
because that was involved. And again, you look at timing, that's all it shows me. Around the same time, Station North starts falling off and losing venues, and all these other venues start closing in areas that are not for nothing a good majority occupied by the Black artistic community.
Hmm.
Maybe, but definitely in there. But you see the casinos that doing whatever, and you see power plant has never been interrupted in the entire time power plants existed. But you don't see that in there. You don't see us in there, not as frequently. So it's like when you look at all that and then bring in what you just lilted on for a second, like this Jersey club thing now, you know, we're fighting. It's like that's why it feels like a war because while at home we're fighting for our own treading water recognition, treading water support, treading water, platform to be us. At the same time, you have other regions kind of, and I'm not going to do the whole Jersey versus Baltimore thing because that's not what I'm talking about. Because what I'm talking about actually kind of isn't necessarily their fault.
Right. It's no.
Um, because it is a perception thing. But we can go. That's a
Yeah.
Ducky Dynamo different conversation. But for the sense, for the sake of this, it's like it's an identity threat.
Right.
We're trying to establish something at home while at the same time our literal sonic identity is being called other stuff, termed as other stuff in regions that do not have our story, regions that did not create what we do. And we can do it all sounds the same, to, your average consumer ear if you want. But again, we're artists. We know the deal.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's like when you start to step on that, it does become serious. It's an erasure thing. And
What
in
do
a
you,
city that's Black population, like based on what I just heard from the last census numbers, we're actually shrinking.
yeah.
Like the last one that came out, we're down to 60% Black now. Last check, it was like 64 or 66 or something. So we done fallen, like a pretty decent amount of Black population within the city.
Right.
So it's like you have big pieces of what I consider big pieces of Black culture from Baltimore getting kind of scooted, out and around and poo-pooed away. You have people kind of alluding to its non-existence because it is getting called other stuff,
Yeah.
or it's not getting named that. While at the same time, again, you do have the city. What makes it seem like again that intentionality thing makes it seem like they are giving more lane and resource and platform and support to certain things, but not these things, not us. It's like what y'all doing?
Yeah.
It's like all of that I just said, you put it on the board. I'm just kind of like, what is it saying? What does this mean? And what do you speaking to us as the demographic and the culture? And by that I do mean those who are the entrepreneurial artists, those of us who are the creatives. And again, those funneled by the Black community that makes up the majority of this city. What are you telling us?
Well, if it's this, right, and this comes out of recently diving back into the Death of the Artist book, and they were
Yeah.
talking about the different hubs, right? Now, this book is from 2020.
Hmm.
He's talking about it again, written 2020. He's like, yeah, people going to start going to the secondary hubs, the Baltimores, the Detroits, because they're easier to get into. So we're in that 4 to 5 year period, because I'm assuming this book was written probably in 2019, right?
Right.
So you start looking at it, and it's like, well, we're seeing those chickens come home to roost. And one of the
Right.
things that he touches on in it is that you have sort of, the quote unquote undesirables. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's the way that
That's how it. Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
presented. And it's just like, oh, we have the queer community, the Black community, the brown community, the
Hmm.
artists, all of the
Hmm.
sketchier people or whatever they may use. And then it's cleaned up and then it's nice. But those contributions, the areas that were made cool, were made by those same quote unquote sketchy individuals.
And now they need it.
Once they're priced out, we put in some lofts, we
No.
put in a bike lane, and then we get out all of the Blacks and all of the people who actually made the place cool. And now we kind of subtly talk about it. We might bring in an artist who feels authentic and have them contribute to it. It's a rebrand, it's a shuffle. And
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 then they benefit off of that because then what they do is create grants and programs specifically for us to come back in, and then they support and they show what we're doing to uplift again on those terms, like you said, though.
yeah,
And then it's tax deductible, so it all comes back.
and we won't do this thing like, and it's not calling out any specific district or anything along,
Uh,
but it's speaking to this. I do this. I've been told to my face, actually at a grant conversation about a grant I've won, and it was a pretty substantial award. Yeah, what you do is not art. What you do doesn't really have merit. And I was like,
oh, that's a big
I
one.
I could
Like
wring your
that.
neck.
Whew.
I'm an East Baltimore guy. Don't let these teeth confuse
I
you.
was like, what you doing?
But
We can
but
go
but I,
there.
but I think it's one of those things, and it's no shots to like visual artists, but it's like the folks that are throwing out funding, they would quickly do something that feels big and splashy. Let's do a mural, but they
Right,
won't do something that's around like programming. If it was
right.
like, hey, let's get in the best Baltimore club music DJs and have some equivalent of a battle, have some equivalent of a showcase, have something, and let's just cut off all of Station North, block party style. This is out there. We do these half
Mhm.
measures. That's kind of what we do. At least that's what I think. I don't know anything. I'm just a guy that just does interviews. Um, but then we have folks such as yourself who, because I remember your a previous life of yours, you were doing something completely different. It had the clouds and stuff involved. Now it's just like you're the big DJ person. You're the DJ. You're the archivist. You're the person that's really trying to preserve this culture here.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on one of the efforts that I recently came across, and I see that you're pushing forward as far as this preservation, specifically in Station North, specifically in sort of the nightclub culture. So can you tell us a bit about this effort?
Okay. So what's going on right now is down in Station North, there is a venue that's been there for a billion years, I suppose. And it's gone through many names, but most recently you would know it as Trips or Gatsby's, right there on the corner of Lafayette and Charles Street. Before it was that, you would know it as Club Choices.
Yeah.
Um, it's been a mainstay, in nightlife in Baltimore Club and Baltimore House and a lot of Black nightlife hubs, the LGBT community, see in there, and it's up for auction. Randomly, random to me at least. It was about 2 weeks ago. I was hanging out on Facebook like we all do before we go sleep, and randomly saw a friend share a post from someone else who happened to see just on an auction site that this property was up for sale.
Yeah.
And when I saw it, I had an internal fit. It drove me crazy because it was like, holy shit, it's yet another place.
Hmm.
We done lost the Hammerjacks, we done lost the docks, we done lost, that was like these places that were fixtures or mainstays or, primary locations in Baltimore club music history are gone. And it's like that was like the last one.
Yeah.
So I just had like a moment. It was like, this is ridiculous. Like somebody gotta buy this. Somebody should buy this.
Yeah.
Somebody should try to buy this. And I made a status, kind of like I shared it. And I was kind of like, look, I will start to GoFundMe right now. What's up? I wasn't playing, but I was playing, because it's one of those things like, this seems ridiculous. Like, there's so much money. And by the time I woke up the next morning, there were enough people in the status like, no, seriously, if we all got together, somebody could do this. This is feasible. And I kind of started, it was just like, okay, something in me clicked. And it was just like, let's go. The reason why this is important, and I'm standing on it and overwhelmed by the response from it, but the response to me is proving the point I'm about to make is, so I don't so much care if Ducky gets to own the club.
Right.
My concern is that somebody who is within the Black artistic community is who owns that property,
Right.
because we don't own shit.
Right.
There's not a lot going in. If I'm not, again, if I speak incorrectly, I apologize. I'm just a girl. But I'm pretty sure that was the last black owned establishment in the region, in the area as far as nightlife.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can't let this happen. Ownership is so important. And my thing became even if okay, so let me dial back. So it's like, all right, let me start this GoFundMe. The amount is that ridiculous $500,000 because that is what the website indicated the minimum bid for the property is.
It's wild.
So I know full well that that's not enough to get the property. Number one. Number two, the auction's in 6 days.
Right.
So it was like by the time anybody saw the post, it was under 3 weeks, before that was going to happen anyway. So I know is again equally ridiculous to expect to get half a mil in 3 weeks. But what's happened is because of how I ran my mouth about it, and because of how many people have now seen it, it's brought the discussion up. And
Yeah.
that was my point. This is a demonstrative thing. I'm gonna go, do it. We're gonna pop up, but I'm on some. I just want to find out who the owners are, and at the least with the money that's been donated, turn that into something, and at least be like, can we be, some sort of sit at the table, or have some sort of say in what becomes of this property, because what the fuck. It's like I really just can't. Even if it in my dream is that even if the property was bought, we don't have to turn the place is huge. It's 3 floors. you know um it was open. I've learned from some of the recent staff of the establishment. It was open as recent as April, just a couple of months ago,
Yeah.
and they used that first floor. And it's like we can fix that and keep it a club, but everything above it, I just see dreams of the resources it could be. Because I was in there, I'm like, these could be studios, these could be co-working spaces, these could be, you know, any of the type of things in places that we in that block in that community, especially in the Station North region, kind of don't have.
Yeah.
I'm like, nah, let's turn that into a museum. Make the second floor a museum, something that's functional, but and not just going to get preyed upon in that same way where developers come, scoop
Mhm.
up a quick Baltimore property, do what they do, try to make a little market or whatever, or cafe or something, and then in a year it's gone. And it's like, what did you do?
And that's one of the things that as a person that this podcast was born in Station North. I talk about that
Mhm.
my billboard Station North intentionally put
Mhm.
there, and a lot of the creative connections, artistic connections, and all of that stuff is through those streets. And then
Mhm.
see these things sort of shifting and that identity changing there, and as I kind of play with when I have real conversations with people, these are real conversations, but they're sort of off
Yeah,
conversations. I'm
I
playing
know
the
what you
host.
mean.
I'm only a boy.
Yeah.
Um, but it's sort of this thing where if you wanted it to happen, it would happen. And I'm talking about bigger than both of us. I'm talking about I'm sure, are preservationist grants. I'm sure there are some attention with people who have more money, more resources, more know-how, the
Right.
inner machinations of how things go. And your point about it can be multiple uses. You can have office space if you need that there, or
Correct.
because
And
we have this glut of the sort of business stuff, so we can
Mhm.
have that there. We have these different pieces there, but I start hearing, and because of the nature of what I do, but then behind the scenes and all of that stuff, you start hearing these different things from different venues that all in this area. They do different things,
Right.
and they're all in a spot. And your notion around like, yeah, we get rid of this, tear this down as some goofy cafe, and we try to we have a record or something that's stupid on the door to say our history. No one wants that.
Yeah.
When I look
I'm
at
like, yeah,
developers, I'm like, is it something cool? Is it going to be something cool? That's the thing I ask for all the time.
and it just seems like such a disservice because the way I see it, I'm like, okay, so to be frank, it's a dinosaur of an establishment. If you're gonna be real, nightclubs don't so much do what they do anymore
Sure.
in America, like period. Again, after the pandemic, we didn't really snap back.
Yeah.
So the idea of a club, or anything like that is one of those things that it's kind of dated out.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, we can keep that going, but getting creative with that space in 2024 with the demographic I'm speaking to and, pretend to be, putting on for and doing all this for, it's like there's ways that we can work stuff out.
Yeah.
And like you said, it is one of those, if you wanted to, you would.
It's a vision thing, right? Where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I find, and we were talking a little bit before we got started in this sort of area, you know, some people have just nothing but ideas, and
Right.
they kind of get stuck when you can't see one of them through, or even, well, this is the reason not. It's like, I know this is goofy. Like before, when I
Mm-hmm.
got on, I had an interview with a chef. I was talking, he's like, never be a chef. That was essentially the thing. He's like, yo, being a chef is wild. He's like, you're never going to win. You make like 3%, what you put in. And it's a wild proposition, but it's sometimes going for those whimsy things. Even being an artist, right? That
Like from the
notion,
gate, the faith that you have to have,
right?
you
So
know.
sometimes it's just like, well, and it's I think a thing that I had a conversation with a politician, and we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about, it might not be whatever the thing we were discussing. It might not be the most fiscally like viable thing, but it might be the
Mm-hmm.
right thing culturally.
And,
It
and
might be the
that's
right
usually
thing
the
for the
case.
city. Yeah.
And that's always the big battle, it feels like, because at the end of the day, the stuff that will do the capitalist thing we need to, is usually something that's soulless.
Right.
And it's like the thing that you go ahead and you do put, again, like what we were talking about earlier a little bit, those undesirables, and those things that they don't want to necessarily uplift.
Yeah.
It's always the stuff, it's always the people that they come back to for content, that
Mhm.
they come back to help them move forward in some kind of way. And that's why, it's like, nah, like after a point in time when you do make certain points and you do advocate for certain stuff, when you hear no's,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, what's really going on here? Because like I said, when you put it on the board, it no longer makes sense unless you have some sort of motive. The interesting thing is, since putting forth this venture, I've learned so much in the past week and a half.
Yeah.
It's been crazy because, and that's what I mean by overwhelmed with the support. And that's what I mean by, okay, the support, so far, I think I don't like the email every day at the end of the day, like, this how much money, somebody gave you. I think it's like a little under $1,200,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, that is the most incredible little thing to me, because this is literally just people like, nah, Ducky, you should run this because, yeah, and hear what I'm talking about. And the interesting information that's all floated in my inbox
Right.
from people who work at big organizations. I'm talking about places that have funded some of the creation of the venues that exist still.
Yeah.
And, things that are like those grants and those behind the scenes things that you were mentioning are sitting there like, wait, what are you doing? Wait, what are you talking about?
Mhm.
And these places that actually do have these resources are now listening to this story and
Yeah.
are now looking at this situation like, wait, maybe maybe we could figure out how to fund this. Wait, maybe we could figure out how to be involved. Wait, what are you doing? And it's like, wait, like I wasn't playing,
Yeah.
but no, like really, like, are you serious? Because this is what I'm talking about. And it's like, this has just demonstrated the possibility of the reality of the shit I be talking, basically. And it's like, no, wait, we're not wrong. All these sentiments that we're sharing, we're not wrong. We're often gaslighting into thinking we're wrong. Again, talking about, the victimization of, that, and like, oh, well, you guys just don't do and all that stuff. We've heard, tons of excuses.
Yeah.
But it's like with this situation, it's just like, because of who's responded,
Yeah.
and who's interested in the thing, it's like, oh wait, we could really, if it's not the let's buy this club, it's that there's something in this conversation that feels like it could be about to happen in the right direction of what I'm talking about.
And,
And
and that
that's what's important to me. And that's why it's like, oh no, I already won. Because there's enough people who are seeing this and like, okay, no, we need to support, you're right, the preservation of, you're right, these artists, you're right, these people,
Mhm.
and this is kind of like just the vehicle of it to me.
This is the last thing I'll say before I ask a few more questions and get
Mhm.
into this sort of rapid fire thing. I made this point, right? And again, real life Rob, podcast Rob, they're very similar, but again,
Yeah.
and I remember last year, I had feelings. I don't have feelings often, but I had feelings last year.
They pop up every now and then.
Yeah, they pop out showing it. But it's this thing where, I worked for the Orioles. Well, when I was
Uh-huh.
worked there for all of undergrad. And, I was really proud to see multiple people that were interviewed on the podcast, kind of getting their due last year when the Orioles act like they were in Baltimore, right? Um,
Yeah.
you had the City
We showed
Connect,
up.
all of that stuff. And I remember on Friday nights, they were playing club music. I was like, club music is playing at Oriole Park. I went there this season. Seems like that's gone. It seems like it was a one off. And that's sort of my thing. It's just like what really caught my attention with your approach and how you're going about it. You're like, look, I'm going to do this. I know that it's going to be an uphill battle, the whole thing. But it's just like, well, let's have this conversation.
Right.
Let's have some attention in this particular area because there are so many places who put out these well-meaning quotes about being connected to the community and preservation and so on. All right, when you donating,
Yeah, like what's up? How have you.
where's that discretionary?
It's like what's the qualification? Like what's it mean? Like what do we have to do, to see that type of thing across the board for everybody?
Yeah.
Um Somebody asked me in another interview recently about this. They were like, more or less, how do you I gotta paraphrase vulgarly because I don't know and remember the exact beautiful words he used, but essentially it was like how you had the balls to do this.
Right.
He was like the audacity. That's what. Thank you.
The
I knew
gall.
I had to say some corny, crash shit before the good word came out. But the audacity was like, he wasn't saying like a bad way, like how dare you, but he was like, no, really, like for you to do this, that takes, a lot,
Risky. Yeah.
yeah, for you to be so bold, basically, to step out and do that, like how and why, like where'd you get that from? Um, because I'm a throw myself out there type of person. I am a more behind the scenes, like, but it was just one of those things that it was like what I've gotten to understanding when it comes to any type of advocacy,
Yeah.
and when you're speaking for anybody else or when you see progress that's not being met. My little tenure in little government around here when I was working with the Green Party, you know, and be on the steering committee and seeing how those platforms go. It is one of those things where you gotta somebody just has to do it.
Right.
Literally, somebody just has to do it. And it doesn't take a lot. It just has to be done. That first step is the first step, but somebody has to do it. And kind of once the idea is out there, time is of the essence. That was the other thing. It was like I very easily could have, looking back hindsight, spent the time to do full research on my network and be like, who, blah blah blah. But again, this auction was coming up in, X amount of time. So it's like if you want to use that as the vehicle, like I was saying, to push this message, time is of the essence.
Sure.
So it's just like, okay, I guess I got to do it. It's like
Then it's knowing
feel
that.
free to take over this project if anybody feels they are better suited than me to do it,
No,
or they're like, no, Ducky, you don't make no sense. Go spend some music, get out of here. Okay, hey, if you want to take on this task, I just want to see that it's done.
you have to shut up and DJ.
But people, wow, I didn't. People have said some crazy shit to me, Rob. So so it's like, especially when you are doing something that is threatening a status quo,
Yeah.
type of thing. I understand. I've again thousands of memes on stuff like that that has informed us of the type of path that doing this type of thing is, but I don't see how it's not worth it. And
Yeah.
like I said, because I'm not putting myself into a thing. Like this isn't about a brand. This isn't about because I want to get booked more or anything like that. It's literally this is Megan, not Ducky. This is Megan, coming and saying, I believe in this for the city and I see this work. So again, as long as there's progress made,
Yeah.
Megan is Ducky would like to see it get done though.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like I'll continue to be loud and continue to be a jerk and continue to be like, yeah, but what about club music? What about, this station or the arts kids? Like, what about all this?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot that's been taken in that area. I don't need to know all of the details. I just know that it's not there, and it
Right.
these
And that's
few
because that's all that matters.
yeah,
It's
it's
not
these few
there.
moments that it's these few moments that it's almost like, let's clean up because company's coming over, and
Mm,
I'll say this, like, I think it was maybe a message from or caption or something from a couple years ago, and it was sort of this conversation around legitimately making Baltimore club music, our official music, and whatever.
yes,
And
that
I,
whole thing I was on once.
and I know
Still
that,
am.
was a thing, right? And you know, this also gives credence to that argument. But I'll say this: when you go to these quote unquote black cities or parts of black cities that don't really get associated with being black, like I think of DC.
Oh,
When you think
right.
of DC music, you're thinking of go-go. It's not a question; it's their thing. When you think of New Orleans, what's the music that comes to mind?
Bounce.
Or jazz?
Or I
You're
said
going,
bounce.
with ass shaking. I'm going like
No,
different
I said
shaking.
bounce, but I don't know what to. That's a bad insight. See, you're gonna get me in trouble making my bad, terrible jokes. But
Go
the
on.
real first answer that came to my mind, and only because you're funny and cool is why I can say this on your program, was Fiesta Rice music because that is what that is what me and mine call the music that comes on when the Popeyes commercial comes on. Fiesta Rice
Yo,
music, and it's like, no, that's that New Orleans. But no, as a DJ, it's bounce. That's all I think of is Big Frida.
yeah. So but it is it's part of their identity, and
Right.
specifically with New Orleans, it's never really been. And some might say it. I've gone there a lot. I like that place a lot.
Jealous. I
It's
can't wait to go. I want to go one day so bad, and
times.
I got to. I'm it's on the list. Like as soon as possible, I'm trying to go down there.
It's a possibility I will be Robert Delacroix. I will be moving. We will see. We'll see what happens. But to the
Okay.
to the to the point of it, it's
Yeah.
sort of when that conversation about what the identity is of New Orleans, it's pretty set.
Yeah.
It might have a little bit of a variance, but it's pretty set. Whereas at times here, when when we are trying to be this city and we're trying to be that city, and we have people who are empowered and are making, those pushes or kind of stirring that drink, I think when we start losing pieces of it, whether it be venues, whether it be sort of our names or the city's names not being associated with a genre that's contributing to popular music and pop
Hmm.
culture, you know, I'm still not over Charm City Kings. I was like, why is Meek Mill in this?
So listen. So look. Let me. Yo, all right. To speak to your point specifically, I have a small PowerPoint presentation on that too because I'm on this. The small PowerPoint presentation goes like this. It's maybe like a slide or two. I don't know, depending on how good of
You got
a
it.
deck maker you are. Baltimore has literally been in the public eye forever in
Mhm.
American media, in American mainstream. You look at, again, like if we consider like every city a little country and it's like look at what like your chief export is.
Yeah.
Our chief export is simply nothing but entertainment. We produce Olympians, we produce, you know, ridiculous like filmmakers, writers, you know, club music, you know, it, I could go down again. I'm a little rusty on a PowerPoint presentation, but it's just one of those things. You take The Wire, for example,
Sure.
you know, what a big thing that was to American culture.
Yeah.
You go back before that, you have The Corner, you have Homicide, you have, it's like we go back and back. America has been trained to watch Baltimore since modern entertainment, basically. The
Sure.
world has been trained to watch Baltimore, in all these little secret little teeny tiny ways. I used to use the example of Scarface. What's your name in Scarface? The girl, the main character girl.
Oh yeah,
She's
yeah,
from
yeah.
Baltimore. She
Yes, she
says it.
is. Yeah,
You
Michelle
know what I
Pfeiffer's
mean?
character. Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like, yeah, she's like, I'm from Baltimore. He's like, what's a Baltimore? And it's like, right. This entire time, the world has been trained to look at Baltimore. So when you do that and you consider our demographic, you consider again our chief exports, the things we produce. We look, Cisco and the Thong song came out of here. Like, stop playing with Baltimore's name when it comes to the stuff and the talent and the culture, the American culture that
Yeah.
has been birthed from this city.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at that and then you do look at, again, bring it down to current demographics, you see that this is a black city, been one of the first,
Hmm.
original black cities in this country. And you see that, and you bring to the point that you said about the identity.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are we trying to be? It's like, why are people are looking at, and that's what matters.
Right.
This is what America's been trained to do. Watch what the hell Baltimore is doing. What is this face you're trying to put on Baltimore?
Yeah.
You look at how, again, I don't want to point fingers to get anybody too angry at me, but look at, for example, our radio.
Hmm.
Look at our darling 92Q. You go back and look back every 5 years, every 10 years, and just not even getting specific. Just look at the programming and
Yeah.
how less and less of a local thing it's become
Right.
and more syndicated. And that's not, I don't even have to say 92Q. That's a lot of radio stations, especially in our urban environments, have turned more syndicated,
Right.
less local music playing, less local DJs, less this, less that. And so again, it brings back that intentionality we were talking about earlier. It's like, what are y'all doing?
Because it's money, and that this
Mm-hmm.
sells. This is the formula. How can we make it homogenistic,
Right.
and we lose that sort of uniqueness?
And that's
Like
not fair.
it 100%. It's
And
not.
that's exactly that simple uniqueness you're talking about is the very same thing that brings people here.
Right.
So
That's
that's like, it's this weird fucked up chicken and the egg. Like, what you want to destroy and squelch the very thing that brings people here, but yet you're changing the image of the thing that brings people here for something that's easy money
yeah.
that ultimately ends up coming back to emulate the original thing that you did. It's like,
Look,
can we just skip all that shit and y'all just pay us?
I'll say this. I'll say
Living
this.
wage. What are we
I'll,
doing?
I'll say this before we move into like sort of the rapid fire portions. I
Yes.
definitely want to hit you with those.
Yes.
There have been a lot of Mr. and Mrs. Me Too podcasts since this one started off,
Right.
and I feel that. I feel that
Yeah.
sort of. Oh, okay,
I
cool.
see.
Yeah, you do that little thing. I was like, okay, cool. And when I talk to these different folks, and this is maybe a microcosm, it might be broader than purely music, because I've been called a culture guy, by some
Mm-hmm.
folks. I've been called the voice by some folks. And
Respect. You
and
earned that.
I call it, say, okay, cool. I'm just a guy that does a podcast. That's the way I look at it. And but it is one of these things where it's like this isn't cool until the right voice is doing it.
Mm.
And that's sort of the thing. And then I see all of these sort of, hey, I want to do this and I'm interested in this. And then the sort of outlets, right?
Right.
Those are the ones that are very interesting. They can't get to a certain person that looks like me or you, right? And they're like, hey, so Rob, since you're in media, I was like, oh, now you know who I am.
Oh, right. Oh, hey, my resume. You did read it, did you?
Yeah, and I send you those and I make those requests for interviews, and suddenly because you can't get to X artists because they don't do interviews, but somehow I got
Mm-hmm. But
them. Like,
they in my circuit.
yeah, how can we maybe collaborate and just how can what's the thing
Let's build.
but look that and it's the like how can
We
we
all
take
little
advantage of,
architects out here, huh?
it's like how can we take advantage of you? How can we exploit you? That's what I was looking for.
Right. There's that. Hey.
This is a passive robbery. That's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's big questions, and I think what I'll pin it with is I think we're both looking towards the same thing.
Yeah. And it
Having
feels like it's soon.
yeah,
That's one of the things that this recent experience, and we'll see how next week turns around and how, somebody was like, enjoy the roller coaster you on because you about to go who knows where. The energy around it, and again with efforts like yours and this podcast, period, and looking at the growth of it, it's like we've done enough. I do believe we've done enough kicking up dust
yeah,
and making enough noise that people are like, so certain things I think are finally starting to turn around
yeah,
because it has slipped into again more pedestrian if you want to use that term, eyes, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like I feel like we're on the brink of a good thing, finally. It
I'm
took a
hopeful.
little bit, but it's like,
I'm hopeful, and I think with the efforts that you're putting forth, and that that was immediately as soon as I saw it. That's why I reached out to you immediately, and I was like,
appreciate
let's
it.
whatever I can do from this platform. I was like, it hits different places, and maybe someone will listen to this interview and be like, no, that makes a lot of sense. That we're in this lane of cultural preservation, specifically Black cultural preservation. I don't need a Netflix series. I
Yeah,
don't need this or that. I need
let's
support.
bring it home.
Yeah, 100%. And so with that, and we'll go into the shameless plugs in a moment, but I
Okay,
got to ask you 3 to 4 rapid fire questions.
let's do it. I think
And
I'm ready.
you know how these go. You don't want to overthink things. So when you mentioned the Scarface thing, right? I was just like, yo, somebody need to sample that immediately. So for you, when you think of Baltimore club music, what is the sample that comes to mind for you? Like, what is that first sample? You're like, man, I love SpongeBob. You know what it is?
You know what? Okay, so you mean like I don't know how to answer that question, but I'm gonna answer that question. You say sample, what comes to mind first? Like if I'm thinking is it's like if the alien came, what's club music?
Yes.
Play example.
Yeah.
The first thing that always comes to mind is the Bernie Mac's Hey.
Nice.
You know
Nice.
what I'm talking about? You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. Just for some reason, I don't know why, but that's like the default. Hey, hey, hey. That's always stuck that sample because it speaks to the time when everybody was sampling like movies and comedians and stuff, and just
Yeah.
all those sound bites. It's like that's it. I think that's the vein. Like,
And that feels fun.
mhm,
That feels fun. It feels like it's accessible. It feels fun. I mean, I
right.
would
Everybody heard it, so everybody like immediately will be like, "What is that? I know what that is," and then now you can dance to it.
right.
You know,
Right.
so it's like it does the whole thing.
So so thank you for that one. And
Yes.
this one is in a similar vein. It's progression here, right? So seeing in the background, obviously multiple venues in Baltimore, DMV, and internationally, right? So
Mhm.
do you have in your repertoire, right? What is that go-to track? What is that joint that you're like, all right, this crowd's a little dead. Let me hit them with this. See, I like that the cogs are going right now. I like that.
It depends. You want to know what's crazy? All right, now that I think about it, um, it depends on the room, right? If there is, yep, all right. No, I'm gonna go in the middle. It's Pork and Swift.
Okay.
That song is the song that I know that I can play as long as it's been since 2008. That song has existed. For some reason, outside the fact it's a perfect club song, I can walk into any room of club music and play that song. Any room of people, because people who, of course, are familiar, they're familiar. So they hear Pork Chop, they hear K Swift, they immediately know, and that's good. That's back to that era of
Yeah.
club music where the sound kind of like broke for everybody because we loved it, but it also is the time when it did start slipping away into, the other hands and the other ears across the country who fell in love with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, nope, that's my answer.
Okay. Okay. This is the last one for you.
Okay,
And I think I have a sense of it, and I'm thinking of a place. I'm not thinking of a venue specifically.
okay.
If you could DJ anywhere in the world, where would it be?
The world,
Might be a trick
wow.
question. Might be a trick question.
Hmm. Damn, you know what? That is a trick question because I had to think about what year we're in for a second. So the quick answer is Brazil. I miss Brazil. I think since you remember past life me, you might remember spent some time in Brazil a little bit. That was fun, and I feel like bringing. I know for a fact this sound down there drive them crazy. They love it. So I'll get my passport again when somebody goes ahead and makes that bucket happen. But you want to know what? The where isn't a where like a place anymore because the internet exists. It's a platform. I don't know which platform. It might be a boiler room. It might be a Serrato, but something that will reach literally everybody. So it's not a place
Yeah.
because no, it's a website. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Because you're
That's
an
probably
ambassador.
it. I just want to get to I would in this day and age. probably if I had to pick a place to go, it would be that, like the airwaves.
Love it. That makes so much sense. Because it's bringing Baltimore club music and this ministry of yours worldwide.
Yes, let's spread as far as possible.
So that's kind of it. I mean, we definitely hammered the Baltimore thing, and I'm really
Yeah.
happy about that. And there are two things I want to do to sort of close out here, close the book.
Hmm.
This chapter. I feel like there's gonna be a part 3 and a part 4 of us just getting back,
Let's
like
say
season 20,
I'm
truth
just a
and
message
info.
away.
um, so one, I want to thank you for coming back on. This has been truly a treat. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners all the information, the website, social media, the GoFundMe, all of it. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, the floor is mine. I'll take it. All right, so my friends, the one thing that we did not mention this whole podcast, and that is okay, um, sort of because I exist and you will follow me and find me, is the illustrious Baltimore Club Music Day. In case you didn't know, we do have a holiday. It is June 17th. It was created last year. Mayor Brandon Scott said so. I was just with him. It was last night at the international placemaking conference situation happening. He was over there. He says, "What's up?" And knows about, he's like, "Did you buy choices yet?" "No, Mayor Brandon, I did not. You know I didn't. But what's up with your donation?" He's like, "How much is it?" Oh, I'm like, come on. But anyway, Baltimore Club Music Day does exist. So look out this month for literally all the club music events that you can find. We're trying to hype that up and make it a real tradition because it's a real freaking holiday written into the city charter. So why not, right?
Right.
So coming up next week again, it is the auction for this property on Wednesday, June 12th. So if any of you are in earshot or this happens to air before then and want to pop up, definitely do that because we're trying to, kind of show up in force, to show like, nah, there's a community here that, cares about this property. Um, to find me in the information, I am Ducky Dynamo on all of the social media platforms. Same name everywhere to keep it easy for you. To keep it easy for you, that is where I would like to direct you to find the GoFundMe link because I don't know the URL and it's too hard to find. But if you find any of my social medias or literally search, I think it's called Preserve Help Ducky Dynamo Preserve Baltimore Club Culture. That's what
That is
like the
true.
GoFundMe is called.
Yeah.
If you want to tap into that and want to donate or at least just read the story, um, and share it, I'm forever grateful, just for the thought. Just even a retweet or a share of a link somewhere or a like goes so far and it's shown me how far it can go. Other than that, we're having a big ass cookout on June 15th for Baltimore Club Music Day. Again, that information is on my page. Come through, get a hot dog and two-step. The week after that is AFRAM. I'll be having an AFRAM after party at the Crown. So come through and shake off and, de-AFRAMatize yourself in that establishment, whatever's needed. And I think that's all the plugs I have. So again, find me on social media at Ducky Dynamo, Facebook, formerly known as Twitter, SoundCloud, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube. I never got into Pinterest because they never, 1,000 years ago when Pinterest first popped up, you had to get like invited to it. And they never approved my thing and sent me an invite. And I was real offended by this back in like 2009. So I was like, I carry grudges. I'm
I hold
sorry.
on to grudges.
No, like I'm sorry. I'm like, no, fuck that whole platform then because I just wanted to pin stuff about like ferrets or whatever. I don't even remember what was going on at the time.
Me,
But
I keep a list. I call it my burn list. I have a little card of like, nah, you're on the list now. Like,
no,
your
and you
food was
should
weird. You are
because we don't
off.
forget. We don't forget. We don't
Oh,
forget.
I'm an air sign.
Um, but yes, that's all the plugging I have to do, I think. I appreciate it.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank the wonderful, the amazing Ducky Dynamo for coming on to the podcast and for all of her work around like preserving Baltimore club music. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.